Hi there, Ben Kisi here. Today we'll be looking at how we can use React context to create a global state in our React applications. If you are new to React, you might ask, why do I need a global state? I can just pass data around as props. And yes, that is true. In the early days of React, the only way you could pass data to nested child components was to pass them down as props. So in a scenario like this where component 3 and component 2 are nested child components of component 1, the only way the app component can send data to component 3 is to pass it down to component 1, component 2, and then component 3. This process is known as prop drilling. Prop drilling can be very cumbersome in large React applications, and one solution to this is to create a global state. So in this scenario, the app component can send data to the global state, and then component 3 can get direct access to the data. This is a solution that Mobex and Redux provided, and using React context can help us achieve the same thing without adding external libraries to our application. Now, let's get to my favorite part, which is writing some code. Okay, so I have here a simple React application, Bootstrap with Create React App, and it simply toggles between dark mode and light mode. Depending on the mode, the background color of the square here changes, as you can see. So let's quickly take a look at the code. You can get access to the starter code on GitHub. I'll put a link in the description below. So in my app.js, I have a simple Boolean state called dark mode, and I'm creating it with the React hook useState. I have a function called toggle dark mode, which toggles the state between true or false. This is an H3 element that prints out the current mode in which we are, whether dark or light mode. I then pass the state, dark mode state, to this component here, component 1. And then here's a button that triggers the toggle dark mode function when you click on it. In component 1, I receive the dark mode state and pass it to component 2 as a prop. And in component 2, I use a ternary operator to change the background color of the component. You can see that in component 1, I just received the dark mode state as a prop, called is dark mode, and pass it on to component 2, and I don't do anything else with it. This is a clear case of prop drilling. We can make component 2 get direct access to the dark mode state without passing it to component 1. So let's do that with context. The first thing will be to create a folder in our source, and let's name it store. You can name it anything. In store, let's create a file called app context. This is where our context will be. So we need to import create context. And let's name our context app context. Okay, so context gives you access to a provider and a consumer. A provider is what you pass your context value to, and a consumer is what you would have used in a class component to access your context value. Since we are using functional components, we will need to use a hook called useContext, which we'll get to in a moment. So we have to create our app provider, which is a simple wrapper component that will wrap our app component in the context provider. So it returns the app context provider. Since it will be wrapping, we need to pass in the children and then the structure, the children. Now let's add in our context values, the values that will be passing to the provider, which is a state, is dark mode, and then set is dark mode. So let's initialize that to false. Now we need to pass in the context value to the provider. It takes any data type, and in this scenario we'll be passing in an object. And then we need to export it. Okay, so the final thing will be to create a simple custom hook called use app context. This will just return our context value from use context, and we pass in our app context. So the reason why I'm doing this is in our various components, if we need to access our context value, what we have to do is to import use context and then import our app context, and then do this to get access to our context value. I don't want to do this over and over again, especially if you have multiple components that you need a context value in. You can create this simple custom hook which you just import and then get access to your context value. So we need to export this as well. We are done with our context. The next thing is to hook it up to our application, and we do that in our index.js, and we need to import our app provider from the store, and then we wrap the app components with the app provider. So by doing this, the app components and all other components within it can now get access to our context value by leveraging our use app context hook. So let's do that in component 2. Import our use app context. And then we can destructure our context values as is dark mode. From use app context. We don't need this prop anymore. Now we are getting the is dark mode state from our context. So now in component 1, we don't need to pass in the prop anymore. The next thing is in our app.js file, we need to import the state setter from our context value. So let's import use app context. And then we can destructure our context values. So we need to is dark mode and set is dark mode. Use app context. So now we don't need this state here. So we replace the setter with the one from the context, and the other state value, we replace those ones as well. So these are the changes we need to make, and let's check if our application is still working. It says dark mode. Oh, we need to remove the prop being passed here, since we don't need that anymore. Now let's see if our application is working. Okay, so our application is working as it used to, and instead of passing props to the various components, we are now using the state from our context value. So let's do a quick recap of what we did. We created a file called app context and created our context, and then we created an app provider, which is a wrapper component that is going to wrap our app with the context provider. And then we created a simple custom hook which returns our context value. In our index.js, we wrapped our app with our app provider so that the app and the various components can get access to our context value. In component 2, we imported our use app context and destructured the dark mode state. And in app.js, we did the same thing. So this is how you can use React context to share data across multiple components without passing it down as a prop. And this is just a simple app to illustrate that. If you like this video, kindly put in a thumbs up, and I'll be doing a part 2 of this where I combine React context with React Reducer for much more complex state manipulations. And kindly subscribe if you want to get a notification when I put out that video. Until I see you in the next one, never stop learning. Peace.